Welcome back to the Deep Discog Dive. Today, I'd like to start off a little bit differently and paint a picture in your head. It's 2011 and you're watching the latest Smosh food battle, but over in the recommended videos, you see this mysterious grayscale thumbnail. You click on it. The video starts with this XO and then jumps into this lurid, despondent ballad about a loveless relationship. The song is called Wicked Games, and the artist is the Weeknd. Who is this Weeknd person? What drove him to make such dark and depressing music? And where the hell is that E? Well, let's find out. Today, we're talking about the Weeknd. Let's dive in.
It's this guy, the Weeknd.
What the is the Weeknd?
He's gonna be major, even though he's from Canada.
This guy looks stupid.
Abel Tesfaye was born in Toronto in early 1990. He first learned to speak Ethiopian and French before English, as he grew up as the son of two Ethiopian immigrants in a multicultural neighborhood. At the age of 4, his mom took him to see The Mask with Jim Carrey, the movie that inspired Abel to become an artist. He hopped between several schools as a teen, but he was ultimately convinced by his friend Lamar Taylor to drop out of high school. From there, he moved into an apartment with Lamar and another friend, and they got into a whole bunch of shenanigans. Drugs, evictions, jail. Abel's future was poised to be tragic, but he had something that not many others had: the ability to vibrate the ligamentous edges of his vocal cords. Abel had been making music ever since high school, but now out on his own, he decided to pursue it full-time under the name The Weeknd. The name came from how he left home with his mattress in tow one weekend and never came back. Oh, also, the missing E, there was already a Canadian band called The Weeknd, so to avoid any legal issues, he just sliced off the third E, which was the right move in my opinion. Could you imagine if he called himself The Weend? With the help of producer Jeremy Rose, the first 3 tracks by The Weeknd dropped in late 2010, What You Need, Loft Music, and The Morning. By the way, those songs, and all the others I bring up, will be in a playlist for you to check out. Links in the description. They gained some steam into 2011, but their biggest exposure by far was their recommendation on a blog run by this total underground writer named, Drake. Yep, fellow Canadian Drake was a large part of The Weeknd's early success, and his cosign helped Abel get coverage in major news outlets. It's very important to make clear though, at this point in time, The Weeknd was nothing more than a silhouette with a dexterous falsetto. His first interview wouldn't be done until fall 2013. This made not just him more captivating, but also his music. In early 2011, Abel started his own label, XO, with 2 music executives, and in March of that year, The Weeknd's first project released, House of Balloons. Ooh, a House of Balloons sounds like fun. I bet we're in for a very happy and lighthearted romp through Abel's psyche. Oh no. House of Balloons sets the thematic stage for every Weeknd project from here on out. With producers Ilangelo and Don McKinney, the production alternates between clouded synth claustrophobia and pummeling percussion, sometimes both on the same track. And Abel's main lyrical foci are drugs, partying, heartache, isolation, and the big sad within us all. This is dark music to be sure, but it manages to communicate said darkness without exalting it. That's an important idea to bring up. Some people believe that The Weeknd's music glorifies this debaucherous lifestyle, and if they're coming into his music later on in his career, I can kinda see where they might get that idea, but it's important to make clear, especially at this early stage, this is not fun music. I enjoy listening to it, I walk away from it having gained something, but I am not having fun with it. Not to mention, the popular music landscape of the time was about having a good time and being real loud about it. To have someone saying, no, this is not fun, sex and drugs and partying are not fun, but you should do them anyway, was a huge change of pace. High for This is a great opener, as Abel guides some nameless person through a drug high. Not only a great entry into the album, but into The Weeknd as an artist. When the Weeknd roller coaster gets made, this should be the music that plays instead of the safety warnings. Wicked Games is always going to hold a special place in my heart because it was the first Weeknd song I ever heard. See, that Smosh anecdote actually had a purpose. This all makes sense now. The Morning is built off of this stellar electric guitar motif. It always makes me feel like the sun is rising after a long night of partying. House of Balloons' Glass Table Girls is the closest to a pop track on here, but even it has an almost 7-minute runtime and an ominous underbelly deep within the lyrics, as Abel tries to maintain a happy face surrounded by drug addicts. And who could forget that interpolation of Susie and the Banshees? That reminds me, this mixtape has some random samples. There's the Susie one I just mentioned, What You Need samples Aaliyah's Rock the Boat, the Knowing samples the Cocteau Twins, and there are 2 beach house samples. The whole mixtape manages to subvert expectations on a consistent basis, in large part thanks to these samples. House of Balloons is a good project and an even better proof of concept. Not only did this build a rock-solid foundation for the rest of The Weeknd's career, but one could chart the path from this record to the sort of hazy, melancholic pop music that would dominate in the next few years. House of Balloons made a sizable impact on the internet due to that blend of engaging music and mysterious persona that I mentioned earlier. Everyone was eagerly anticipating what this man of mystery would put out next, and we got that next project with the Noise EP. Wait, what? So this was released shortly after House of Balloons. Abel tweeted that the EP was leaked by salty producers. It's okay, though I'd say everything it does, Hob does better. But really though, his second mixtape, Thursday, dropped 5 months later in August 2011. As you might imagine from the quick turnaround, this one is pretty similar to House of Balloons. However, that's not a bad thing, and it shows that Abel is able to expand on his initial sound. The biggest example is the project's greater emphasis on electric guitars, whether it's the ominous descending chords on Life of the Party or the sparse flanged motif on The Birds Part 2. Other small tweaks to the Weeknd sound are here as well. The Birds Part 1 is built off drumline percussion. Rolling Stone is a full-on acoustic guitar ballad. I've always loved how Abel's voice gets more and more saturated in reverb as the track goes on, as if his voice is fading into vapor. And The Zone might be my favorite track on the mixtape.
Whoa. All these broken hearts on that pole.
It's that guy with the blog! Yep, as if sharing The Weeknd on his blog wasn't enough, Drake shows up on The Zone with the same sad boy bars he was becoming known for around this time. A solid verse. Thursday is another good mixtape from The Weeknd and proof that his style had legs beyond just one project. Shortly before Thursday released, The Weeknd started performing for the first time around Toronto. Along with a string of solo shows, he also got to open for Drake a few times, as well as his own slot at Drake's OVO Festival. Speaking of Drake, he put out his own critically acclaimed album, Take Care, in late 2011. Now, some people may say that this record takes a lot of cues from The Weeknd's mixtape so far. Spoiler alert, some people is me. In fact, Abel would later say that a few tracks off Take Care were supposed to be on House of Balloons. But hey, Take Care is a good record, and The Weeknd even got a feature on it. To close out this trilogy, Abel's third mixtape, Echoes of Silence, released in December 2011. Once again, the same basic musical and lyrical premise from the last two mixtapes is here, but there's a greater immediacy to the production. The haze of those mixtapes is certainly still here, but the record is more often out to smack you upside the head. The opener DD stands for Dirty Diana, the same name as an old Michael Jackson song. In fact, The Weeknd's DD has the same lyrics and melody as MJ's DD. One day we will have a term that covers what kind of song this is. This is Abel's first time showing musical interest in pop, in recontextualizing pop music in his own twisted way. Doesn't hurt that, especially in his falsetto, Abel sounds pretty darn close to the late King of Pop. Initiation is the Weeknd song that most point to when they want to draw attention to how depraved this man can get, and they're not wrong to put their focus on this. It's a sick, in a negative way, song, and there are lines on this that I will not repeat at this time. Again, I will stress that with these early mixtapes especially, this is not meant to be fun music. The Fall brings in Clams Casino as a guest producer with its mix of distant claps, distorted bass, and despondent vocal performance. Same Old Song has a feature from Juicy J. I have feature in the smallest font size possible because he just does some ad-libs at the very end. And the title track closes things on an especially somber note, with nothing but a piano and Abel begging someone not to leave. A fitting end not just for the project, but for this mixtape trilogy as a whole. These three mixtapes made The Weeknd one of the most buzzed-about stars of 2011. Plus, House of Balloons and Echoes of Silence were nominated for the 2011 and 2012 Polaris Music Prize, respectively. Just goes to show you the power of the word of. He was signed to Republic Records in September 2012, with EXO being Osmosis Jonesed as a subsidiary. His first release under Republic was an officially repackaged compilation of his three mixtapes called Trilogy. Along with remastered versions of all tracks, they also included a bonus track with each mixtape. 28, Valerie, and Till Dawn, Here Comes the Sun. However, we did lose the Rock the Boat sample on What You Need. The success of the trilogy led to The Weeknd's first worldwide tour, and more importantly, his first time stepping outside of Toronto. So, inspired by his first time seeing the wonders of the world, Abel decided to make a horror film. Being away from Tim Hortons for so long changes a man. Or rather, he decided to make an album inspired by horror film masters like John Carpenter, Ridley Scott, and David Cronenberg. And in September 2013, 2013, we were treated to the album that made The Weeknd a household name, the record that signaled a bold new future for R&B and pop music. Kissland. You know, Kissland? So this one is kind of interesting. The mixtapes before this have their identity as the records that laid The Weeknd's foundation. The albums after this have the hits and the distinct visual aesthetics to differentiate them. Kissland, however, occupies this weird in-between space. For all intents and purposes, this is the mixtape trilogy, but bigger. The production is bigger, the scope is bigger, the emotions are bigger. If that's what you want out of Abel's first record under a major label, then you sure got it. And yet, something isn't fully clicking for me. Belong to the World is a good starting example. I love the sound of this song. Those pounding drums, which may or may not have been inspired by Portishead, the symphonic strings, the impassioned vocals, but there's something about lines like that, when placed against the sweeping backdrop of the song, feels overly dramatic. If those lines were on, say, Rolling Stone, I'd probably have an easier time buying them. Other parts of the record can also feel a bit stilted. It might be unfair to compare to the openers from the mixtapes, but Professional didn't hook me the same way High for This or DD did, though lyrically I like how it sets up the album's framing of the downsides of fame and money. And are you ready for the dumbest thing ever? I don't like the chorus hook on Live For. It moves too fast, feels forced and awkward. What a stupid thing to dislike a song over, and yet here I am. But even with its growing pains, there is still plenty here to enjoy. Wanderlust is probably my favorite track on the record, a blueprint for the disco and funk that Abel will start weaving into his music, and the beat switch leading into the second half of the title track is outstanding. I should also mention how the visuals differ from the mixtape trilogy. Kissland takes visual inspiration from Japanese street culture. I think this is an aesthetic that fits The Weeknd very well, and I do hope he returns to it at some point down the road. And slight tangent, remember that friend Abel was first living with, Lamar Taylor? He's been with Abel up to this point as his creative director, and he will continue to serve in that role to this day. So, Kissland. There's enough here to warrant a listen, but I think a lot of what is done on here musically will be done better on future Weeknd albums. Kissland did sell pretty well, and it helped to get Abel a slot opening for Justin Timberlake, but critical reception was a bit muted this time compared to the mixtapes. The bulk of Abel's time after Kissland was spent on collabs with other artists, pop artists to be specific. For one of the Hunger Games movies, he contributed his own song Devil May Cry, plus guest vocals to a version of Sia's Elastic Heart. He worked with Ariana Grande on Love Me Harder. He started 2015 with a phenomenal bit of brand synergy. He provided the song Earned It for the 50 Shades of Grey film adaptation. Give whoever thought of that a raise. I really enjoy the song. Abel's voice fits well with strings, so it only makes sense to give him a full orchestra. I also love the descending bass on the last chorus. Little did we know that Earned It would be the first tease of Abel's next album. After a few more singles, The Weeknd's solo studio project, Beauty Behind the Madness, released in August 2015. The first song I heard off this record was Can't Feel My Face, Abel's first song co-written by legendary songwriter Max Martin. Okay, this starts off like a normal Weeknd song. He's opining about a doomed relationship, same as usual. Hey, I'm gonna go get some pastrami. Does anybody want any? I can feel my face when I'm with you. What the hell was that? I know she'll be the death of me, at least we'll both be numb. I don't know how this is possible, but for a guy who already has a Michael Jackson cover under his belt, this is the most The Weeknd has ever sounded like MJ. I love it. I also really enjoy The Hills, mainly because Abel got to have everyone's cake and eat it in front of them. I had always figured that a guy as lyrically dark as Abel could never enjoy mainstream success, but all he had to do was present the same luridness with a slightly more pop arrangement, and bam, huge song. The times they are a-changin'. Can't Feel My Face and The Hills demonstrate how easily The Weeknd could work in pop music, something that the rest of this album backs up pretty well. Tell Your Friends has Kanye West as producer, and this might be one of his best beats from the 2010s. I hope Kanye supplies more beats to Abel's songs in the future. They'll collaborate again, but it'll be Abel on Kanye's tracks and not vice versa. Shameless brings back the acoustic guitar. Often and Acquainted are the usual solid Weeknd bangers. Losers brings Labyrinth into the fray. I say this with the benefit of hindsight, having heard his work on Euphoria, but Labyrinth does well when placed into The Weeknd's down-tempo arena. Abel should do a song for Euphoria. That'd be cool. Anyway, Prisoner has Abel teaming up for the first time with Lana Del Rey. Here's a question. How have these two not collaborated more often? I know they'll do it again in the future, but their aesthetics seem so perfectly matched. They could honestly make a full album one day, and I would definitely check it out. All in total, Beauty Behind the Madness is a solid album, but its real success is its singles. With them, The Weeknd charted his path into mainstream popular music. Somehow, the guy with the Basquiat haircut who is interpolating Susie and the Banshees as he sang about drug highs, that guy was becoming a pop star. Beauty Behind the Madness was, from a sales and charts perspective, The Weeknd's biggest record yet. It ended up being the most streamed album of 2015, and it went double platinum in the US. Following a tour across North America for the rest of 2015, Abel spent most of 2016 on other people's songs. He sang the chorus on Kanye West's FML, he popped up on Travis Scott's Rodeo, he was featured on Beyoncé's 6 Inch, he also guested on Might Not by fellow Canadian musician Belly, who had been and would continue to be a songwriter on some of the Weeknd's tracks. But as fall 2016 approached, news began getting out of a new Weeknd era, one that would feature French electronic duo Daft Punk in some capacity. And if that wasn't a big enough change...
Whoa. Hey guys.
This new eon of The Weeknd launched with Starboy, released in November 2016. And in case you weren't sure that this was a new eon... I'm sorry, the old Weeknd can't come to the phone right now. Starboy's lead single was its title track, one of The Weeknd's most successful singles ever. A track that's somber in sound, but braggadocious in tone. And sure, Abel had good reason to brag at this point. And yet, I don't know, Starboy doesn't fully click with me. Oh, you're an MFing Starboy, Abel? Prove it and give me $10,000 right now. Also, I know it has their name in the title, but aside from those vocoders on the chorus, I would not even know Daft Punk was there. Still, Starboy works as an introduction to this new synth-fueled iteration of The Weeknd. Plus, it's my mom's favorite Weeknd song. For what that's worth. I am a much bigger fan of his other collab with Daft Punk, but I'll get to that in a bit. Party Monster has these synths that feel like an 80s horror movie. If it was intentional, it's a great harkening back to Kiss Land. Reminder is fine as a song, but it also has this line. I just won a new award for a kid show. Talking about a face, coming off a bag of blow. That is very funny. Rockin' and Secrets are two of Abel's finest dance tracks, Secrets especially. Great use of samples from Tears for Fears and The Romantics. False Alarm is... You know, I still don't fully know what this song is. I guess it's Abel trying his hand at punk rock? I certainly respect that this song exists, but I'm not entirely sure I like it, though it does have a memorable first-person music video. I'm sorry, we're 5 years removed from House of Balloons, and we're just now getting the viewer discretion advisories? The first half of Starboy up to Sidewalks featuring Kendrick Lamar is often a good time. However, this is The Weeknd's longest non-compilation album, and in the second half, it starts to drag. Slice off most of these songs, and you might have The Weeknd's most focused album ever. If I was the one in charge of the track list, I'd keep Love to Lay, All I Know, Die For You, and definitely I Feel It Comin', the other collab with Daft Punk. Man, I love this song, the clear 80s throwback production, and those classic Daft Punk vocals. This may be the finest closer on any Weeknd album. So that's Starboy, a record that tries to be a whole lot of things and succeeds more often than not. Still, I can't help but feel like this could have been an all-time classic had it tried being fewer things. Starboy. Then again, who cares what I think, because Starboy was another big success for The Weeknd. Sales and fan reception were through the roof, and he even received a few Grammys for it. Look at that, the Grammys love The Weeknd. This will never change. The Weeknd spent just about all of 2017 touring for Starboy. 2018 started off with him once again teaming up with Kendrick for a song off the Black Panther soundtrack, but soon after, we got teases for a new Weeknd project. And with just 2 days notice, in March 2018, we were treated to My Dear Melancholy, comma. The comma's part of the name. We've got Abel's first non-salty EP on our hands here, but that's not all. This one is a return to Abel's beginnings, his mixtape trilogy, the sound he cut his teeth on, and It's okay. If you're expecting to get that old school Weeknd depravity, you are gonna be disappointed. It's only there if you squint your cochleas. However, while the lyrics may not reach initiation levels, the sound is definitely reminiscent of The Zone or Wicked games. Honestly, I think this project works better when you view it as a breakup record. The Weeknd had just come off 2 high-profile relationships, and this EP lets him pour out his soul in a way that would have felt awkward on Starboy. Call Out My Name is the project's big single, and to be perfectly frank, I've never been huge on it. Maybe it's because this comes right after Starboy and I feel it coming, but its dour tone eventually feels like my ears are in molasses. It feels too slow for my tastes. But there are highlights, like Wasted Times with its breakbeat percussion, and Hurt You featuring Gestafelstein, and Guy Manuel from Daft Punk. My Dear Melancholy is a perfectly fine project, but it's more important in my eyes as a recentering. I think Abel would have continued on the Starboy path had he not released this, and while there's nothing wrong with that path necessarily, the one he chose instead is gonna be so much better. The following months for Abel after My Dear Melanoma were split between touring and being a disc jockey. Abel got his own radio show on Apple Music, Memento Mori. 2019 started off with his collab with Gestafelstein, Lost in the Fire. These days you may know it more as a TikTok sound, but it's a good song on its own, albeit with a certain unsavory stanza that some took as misogynistic. There was also this line,
And I just want a baby with the right one. Cause I can never be the one to hype one.
is that what I think it's about? Abel would be mostly silent after that until later that year when he teased a new song called Blinding Lights through a Mercedes-Benz ad. Do you realize what you just did? He also had a role as himself in the film Uncut Gems, where he gets into a fight with Adam Sandler. That film happened to be scored by Daniel Lopatin, who you may know as the electronic producer 10 Point Never. He and Abel hit it off pretty quickly, and Daniel was soon brought in to work on his new album, along with folks like Max Martin, Elangelo, and Metro Boomin. Abel performed 2 songs from this new album on SNL, with Daniel Craig as the host, which gave us this classic line.
Ladies and gentlemen, The Weeknd.
He was there to promote the new Bond movie, which had been delayed because of some strange virus going around. The Weeknd released After Hours on March 20th, 2020. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, that date is infamous for being the release date of Animal Crossing New Horizons, but I also personally remember it as the day that the world went to flippin' heck. In a very cruel twist of fate, After Hours arrived just as COVID-19 made us all isolated and anxious. In other words, the perfect circumstances for a Weeknd album. And what a Weeknd album to get. This is Abel's best album yet, or perhaps more accurately, it's the most comprehensive Weeknd album yet. If you only had an hour to live and wanted the best representation of what Abel Tesfaye was capable of, I'd put After Hours on in a heartbeat. And you'd have a few spare minutes for Crazy Frog. Remember how I said The Hills was Abel getting to have the best of both worlds when it came to his usual depressive demeanor and pop song glory? This is him doing that for a whole album. To start, there are plenty of songs where Abel and co get to sprawl out. Snow Child is the most autobiographical Abel has gotten in his music so far, detailing his time growing up in Toronto. Faith starts like a usual Weeknd song, but eventually breaks down into synth pads, sirens, and Abel wrapped in vocal processing. The title track, God, I love this title track. How sparse the production is at the start, the timid way Abel sings, the perfect beat drop. One of my all-time favorite Weeknd songs. But on the other side of the musical coin, the pop songs on here? Oh my god. Hardest to Love and Scared to Live work well as companions as they document a troubled relationship. I love how the beat suddenly drops out on the former,
It's hard to let me go.
and the Elton John interpolation on the latter. In Your Eyes has a stellar bass line and a glorious sax solo. Make sure you don't lose your head there, Abel. Heartless is a certified trap banger with some gorgeous string swells, but its best part is the intro.
I've been dodging death in the 6-speed. Amphetamine got my stomach feeling sickly.
Fun fact, when I put this album on my top 10 list for 2020, it took me 7 edits to play this section without getting blocked, because I was dedicated to making sure you heard how sick that part was. But really, what is this record without its biggest hit by a Las Vegas mile, Blinding Lights? This is the kind of song that first comes off as a ripoff of something else, but that something else doesn't exist. It's a song that feels like it has been with us for decades, and yet it's just barely over 2 years old. After Hours is the quintessential Weeknd album. It's a deft balancing act, the Weeknd being able to keep the lurid aesthetic, the cohesive art direction set against the gaudy backdrop of Vegas, and the multi-part songs, while giving us some of the best pop hooks of the decade. If you haven't heard this yet, this is definitely worth your time. Abel was supposed to go on a worldwide tour following After Hours' release, but But even without a tour, After Hours' impact was immediate. Critics and fans loved it, several songs became huge hits, and Blinding Lights made the Billboard Hot 100 into the Billboard Hot 99 because that song became a permanent fixture on that chart. It ended up leaving in September 2021. Everybody loved After Hours. It's the best. It's the best. It's number one. It's number one. It's always number one. Look, here come the nominees for this year's Grammys. I bet After Hours is gonna get nominated for every award, especially Best Engineered Album Non-Classica. Yeah, so that didn't happen. Despite all of the praise thrown at it, After Hours received 0 Grammy nominations, and Abel was pissed. He vowed to never submit his music for Grammy consideration ever again, and called the Recording Academy corrupt. But who cares about a stupid gramophone? Because Abel was performing at the 2021 Super Bowl halftime show. This was a pretty good performance with just about every song of his you would expect. I did also lose my head a little bit when he brought in the chorus from House of Balloons, which picked up in tempo to lead into Blinding Lights. Inspired musical direction there. The Weeknd's halftime show performance coincided with his first globally released greatest hits record. It has all the songs you'd expect, and it makes me feel very old. Following the Super Bowl, things went quiet once again for Abel. In the face of a global pandemic, he began work on a new project, one that would be very much inspired by the sadness and pain brought on by isolation and fear of the future. But then, something interesting happened. He scrapped it. Abel scrapped this new project, saying that it was, quote, emotionally detrimental. What can I say? We love our emotionally mature kings. Instead, Abel shifted focus to another kind of project, and with just 4 days of advance notice, The Weeknd released his most recent project as of today, Dawn FM, in January 2022. Look, I know the pandemic aged everybody in their own way, but this is ridiculous. In case you're wondering why Abel looks like that, it's because Dawn FM is a concept record, a story of the passage between this world and the next with a fictional radio station as your guide. The first proper song on the record, Gasoline, is weird. It's a weird song, mostly because of the way Abel sings. His melodic contour sounds like he's sighing. But the chorus has grown on me since I first heard it, and it did not take me much time to fall in love with How Do I Make You Love Me and lead single Take My Breath. Alright, it's been enough time, so I can ask, why the hell is Sacrifice not a bigger hit? Is it overexposure? The lingering shadow of Blinding Lights? Robo-Stalin on 100,000 computers? That electric guitar evoking the processed stylings of Daft Punk, the subtle background string swells, the way the beat and Abel's vocals line up on the chorus? It may not be his biggest hit, but it's one of my favorite tracks by him. I also enjoy the Swedish House Mafia remix too. So the first few tracks are absolute grade A bangers and jams. But once you get to Here We Go Again with Tyler the Creator, something starts changing. This one feels like a very abrupt change of pace, as if a random Tyler track suddenly got added to the track list. The next few songs definitely take the pace down a bit, and I kinda wish the record kept up the tempo of those first few songs. Then again, in an alternate universe where it does keep up that energy, there's a version of me complaining that the album doesn't change things up enough. Fun fact about me, I will never be happy. But while the later half can meander, the last 3 tracks are pretty great. I Heard You're Married feels like an 80s one-hit wonder you come across on a late-night drive. I will never hate on those staccato guitars. Less Than Zero is the closest Abel has sonically gotten to the war on drugs of all bands, as he wishes to be freed from the guilt and pain of a past relationship. And it leads into the closer, Phantom Regret by Jim, as Jim Carrey drops freestyle poetry about the beautiful transition into that big house of balloons in the sky. Oh, I should also mention, Dawn FM has a host, and it's The Mask himself. He's the disembodied voice guiding us through this album, and one of many guests on here, along with Tyler, Quincy Jones, and Lil Wayne. Is Dawn FM better than After Hours? I don't know, largely because they feel like opposite projects. After Hours felt like the ultimate pinnacle of what The Weeknd as we knew him could be. Dawn FM is a new kind of Weeknd. One who says, no, this is not fun. Sex and drugs and partying are not fun, and I'm gonna try to move past them. And while you might be bummed that The Weeknd is moving in a new direction, I'm glad he did it. And Dawn FM has me excited for whatever awaits Abel next.
tried your best with me, I know. I'm a virgin, never got close enough.
The Weeknd is currently gearing up for the After Hours Till Dawn tour for his 2 most recent albums. I'm sure it'll be a good time for everyone with a less than zero amount of aging makeup. He's also been busy filming a TV show. It's called The Idol, it's about the music industry and cults, it's co-created by the guy who created Euphoria, and it'll be out on HBO at some unknown point. We may also be in for another album relatively soon, as Abel has been teasing a new trilogy with After Hours and Dawn FM as its first 2 parts. At this rate, I bet the album cover will be a skeleton. If you want to get into The Weeknd, I would start with After Hours. Like I said, it's the best all-in-one package of who The Weeknd is as an artist. After that, I would personally recommend you check out House of Balloons, Beauty Behind the Madness, and Dawn FM. And if you have a favorite Weeknd song, album, related thing, I would love to know what it is in the comments.